This video will discuss the bibliography in the Chicago referencing style. Most of our discussions throughout this video series have dealt with footnotes, but many of your assignments will also require a bibliography. Some people use the terms bibliography and reference list interchangeably. Some use bibliography to indicate everything you've read, and reference lists to indicate everything you've cited. In Chicago, the footnote system at least, a bibliography will be a list of everything you've cited. Unless instructed otherwise, there's no need to include items you've read but did not cite. So this is an example of a basic bibliography. There are going to be a few types of bibliographies, which we'll get into later. But generally speaking, it's going to be a list of all the sources that you have cited in alphabetical order by surname of the author. And we'll go into this in more depth. Now, if you're feeling overwhelmed, there's good news. Much of the information you include in the footnotes are also included in the bibliography. However, there are a few key differences to keep in mind. First, with footnotes, you may have noticed that the information is generally separated with commas. And in the bibliography, generally speaking, the information is separated by full stops. Let me show you what that looks like. So in this example, we have Making Murder Public by K.J. Kesselring. And in the footnote, we have the information separated by commas, and in the bibliography entry, we have the information separated by full stops. Another key difference you might have noticed is how the author is displayed. So in the footnote, you will have the first name first and the surname second. In the bibliography, that's switched. So you will display the surname first, then a comma, followed by the first name. You'll also see that in the footnote, the publication information, so location, publisher, and date, are enclosed in round brackets. However, that is not the case in the bibliography. Those are going to be some of the main pieces of information you'll need to remember for differences between footnotes and bibliography. You can also see a difference with book chapters. So in the footnote, you will see that you only cite the page number that you actually referenced, and you put that usually at the end of the citation. In the bibliography, you will need to include the page range of the entire chapter, so in this case, 174 to 196, and you will also generally put it after the book authors or book editors, but before the publication information. Something to note with authors is that the switch around for the author's name is only for the first author listed. So remember our previous example, which was written by Cecil Wright, Sonia Thompson, and Yvonne Channer. Well, in the bibliography, only Wright's name gets flipped around, whereas Thompson and Channer are in the same format as footnote. So first name first, surname last. Only Wright's name is in the surname first format. And also, remember how you used EDS full stop and TRANS full stop to indicate an editor or translator in addition to an author, at least for the footnotes? Well, in the bibliography, you will usually need to spell it out. In the bibliography, you usually spell it out, so edited by or translated by. However, if there is an editor or translator in place of the author, then you can use the abbreviations. I also mentioned earlier that there are some different types of bibliographies that might be good to know. So this is what we call a full bibliography. That one has the full information that's listed for your sources, so full title, full publication information, author, etc. Generally alphabetical order by surname unless stated otherwise. This is going to be the easiest for anyone reading your essay, and therefore this is the format that you should use for most bibliography unless you're instructed otherwise. Occasionally, you might be asked to do what's called an annotated bibliography. And so that allows you to give a brief description of each resource to give a summary, and also sometimes explain how it works within your essay. So I can see an example here and here that there's a brief paragraph, usually indented, sometimes in square brackets. Now, this can be a short paragraph like I've got here, or a longer paragraph. It depends on the assignment, but this is something that you might be asked to do. If you're ever stuck, you could always contact the Center for Academic Development for guidance. There are other bibliography styles, such as a select bibliography, or a bibliography where you list all the authors grouped together, but a full bibliography and an annotated bibliography are going to be the two main bibliographies that you deal with. You might also be asked to divide a bibliography into different sections. So for history students, the more common example would be dividing into primary sources versus secondary sources. And the exact format doesn't really matter as long as it's clear and consistent and your readers can easily understand what you're trying to achieve. If you're ever reading a bibliography or your Aspire list and have set it to Chicago referencing, you might wonder what these 3 dashes were. Well, those are called 3M dashes, and those are used to indicate the same author. So in this example, we have a book by Ibram X. Kendi, and then just below that, we have a different title, but by the same author. You don't have to use 3M dashes, and in fact, they often don't sort well in a word processor, but if you were ever curious, that's what those are. To learn more about Chicago referencing, watch the other videos in this series, or visit the relevant course resource help page for your subject.